Walton, in continuation. August 26th. You have read the strange and terrific story, Margaret, and do you not feel your blood congeal with horror, like that which even now curdles mine? Sometimes seized with sudden agony, he could not continue his tale. At others, his voice broken and piercing, uttered with difficulty the words so replete with agony. His fine, lovely eyes were now lighted up with indignation, now subdued to downcast sorrow, and quenched into infinite wretchedness. Sometimes he commanded his countenance and tones, and related the most horrible incidents with a tranquil voice, suppressing every mark of agitation. Then, like a volcano bursting forth, his face would suddenly change to an expression of wildest rage as he shrieked out imprecations of his persecutor. His tale was connected, and told with an appearance of simplest truth. Yet I own you too that the letters of Felix and Safie, which he showed me, the apparition of the monster, seen from our ships, brought me to greater conviction of the truth of his narrative than his assertions, however earnest and connected. Such a monster has real existence. I cannot doubt it, yet I am lost in surprise and admiration. Sometimes I endeavored to gain from Frankenstein the particulars of the monk creation's formation, but his point was impenetrable. "Are you mad, my friend?" said he, "or whither does your senseless curiosity lead you? Would you also create for yourself and the world demonically enemy? Or to what your questions read? Peace, peace, learn my miseries, and do not seek to increase your own." Frankenstein discovered that I made notes concerning his history. He asked to see them, and then he himself corrected and augmented them in many places, but principally in giving the life and the spirit to conversations he held with his enemy. "Since you have not perceived my narration," said he, "I could not let the mutilated one should go down to prosperity." Thus has a week passed, while I have listened to the strangest tale that ever imagination formed. My thoughts and every feeling of my soul have been drunk up by the interest for my guest, which his tale and his elevated and gentle manners have created. I wish to soothe him, yet can I counsel one so infinitely miserable, so destitute of every hope of consolation, to live? Oh no, the only joy that he can now know will be when he composes in shattered feelings to peace and death. Yet he enjoys one comfort, the offspring of solitude and delirium. He believes that when he dreams he holds converse with his friends, and derives from the communion consolation for the miseries and excitements to his vengeance, that they are not the creations of his fancy, but the real beings who visit him in the regions of a remote world. This faith gives him solemnity to the reveries that render him to be almost as imposing and interesting as truth. Our conversations are not always confined to his own history and misfortunes. On every point of general literature he displays unbounded knowledge, and a quick and piercing apprehension. His eloquence is forcible and touching, nor can I hear him when he relates a pathetic incident, or endeavors to move the passions of pity or love without tears. What a glorious creature he must have been in the days of his prosperity, when he is thus noble, godlike, and ruined. He seems to feel his own worth and the greatness of his fall. "When younger," he said, "I felt as if I were destined for some great enterprise. My feelings are profound, but I possess the coolness of judgment that fitted me for illustrious achievements. This sentiment of worth of my nature supported me, when others would have been oppressed. for I deemed it criminal to throw away the useless grief for those talents that might be useful to my fellow creatures. When I reflected on the work I had completed, no less than one of creation, a sensitive and rational animal, could I not rank myself with a herd of common projectors. But this feeling, which supported me in the commencement of my career, now serves only to plunge me lower in the dust. All my speculations and hopes are as nothing, and, like the archangel who aspired at omnipotence, I am chained to an eternal hell. My imagination was vivid, yet my powers in analysis and application were intense. But the union of these qualities, I conceived the idea and executed the creation of a man. Even now I cannot recollect, without passion, the reveries while the work was incomplete. I trod heaven in my thoughts, now exulting in my powers, now burning with the idea of their effects. From the infancy I was imbued with high hopes and a lofty ambition. But how I am sunk! Oh, my friend, if you had known me as I once was, you would not recognize me from the state of degradation. Despondency rarely visits my heart. A high destiny seemed to bear on me until I fell, never, never again to rise. Must I then lose this admirable being? I have longed for a friend. I have sought one who would sympathize with me and love me. Behold, on the desert seas I have found such a one. But I fear I have gained him only to know his value and lose him. I reconcile him to life, but he repulses the idea. I thank you, Walton, he said, for your kind intentions towards so miserable a wretch. But when you speak of new ties and fresh affections, think you that any can replace those who are gone? Can any man be to me as Clerval was, or any woman another Elizabeth? Even where the affections are not strongly moved by any superior excellence, the companions of our childhood always possess a certain power over our minds, which hardly any later friend can obtain. They know our infinite dispositions, which, however they may be afterwards modified, are never eradicated, and they can only judge our actions and move certain conclusions as to the integrity of our motives. A brother or sister can never, unless indeed such symptoms have been shewn lately, suspect the other of fraud or false dealing. When another friend, however strongly may be attached, may, in spite of himself, be invaded with suspicion. But I enjoyed friends, dear not only through the habit of association, but from their own merits. And I, wherever I am, the soothing voice of Elizabeth, the conversation of Clerval, will be ever whispered in my ear. And they are dead. But one feeling in such solitude can persuade me to preserve my life. If I were engaged in any high undertaking or design, fraught with extensive utility to my fellow creatures, then I could live to fulfill it. But such is not my destiny. I must pursue and destroy the being to whom I gave existence. Then my lot on earth will be fulfilled, and I may die. September 2nd. My beloved sister, I write you, encompassed by peril and ignorant whether I am doomed to ever see near England, and my dear friends that inhabit it. I am surrounded by mountains of ice, which admit no escape and threaten every movement to cross our vessel. The brave fellows whom I have persuaded to be my companions look towards me for aid, but I have none to bestow. There is something terribly appalling in our situation, yet my courage and hopes do not desert me. We may survive, and if we do not, I will repeat the lessons of Mazinica, and die with a good heart. Yet, what, Margaret, will be the state of your mind? You will not hear of my destruction. and you will anxiously await my return. Years will pass, and you will have visitings of despair, and yet be tortured by hope. Oh, my beloved sisters, the sickening failings of your heartfelt expectations are, in prospect, more terrible to me than my own death. But you have a husband and lovely children. You may be happy. Heaven bless you and make you so. My unfortunate guest regards me with tenderness, companion. He endeavors to fill me with hope, and he talks as if life were a possession which he valued. He reminds me of how often the same accidents have occurred in other navigators who have attempted to sea, and in spite of myself, he fills me with cheerful auguries. Even the sailors feel the power of his eloquence. When he speaks, they no longer despair. He arouses their energies, and while I hear his voice, they believe these vast mountains of ice are molehills, which will vanish before the resolutions of man. These feelings are transitory. Each day's expectations delayed fill them with fear. I almost dread a mutiny caused by despair. September 5th. A scene has just passed with such uncommon interest that although it is highly probable that these papers may never reach you, I cannot forbear reporting it. We are still surrounded by mountains of ice, still in imminent danger of being crushed by their conflict. The cold is excessive, and many of the unfortunate comrades have already found a grave amidst the scene of desolation. Frankenstein has daily declined in health. A feverish fire still glimmers in his eyes, but he is exhausted, and when suddenly roused by any exhortation, speedily sinks into apparent lifelessness. I mentioned in my last letter the fears I had entertained of mutiny. This morning, as I watched the wan countenance of my friend, his eyes half closed and his limbs hanging listlessly, I was roused by half a dozen of the sailors, who desired admission into the channel. They entered, and their leader addressed me. He told me that he and his companions had been chosen by the other sailors to come in deputation to me, to make me a demand, which, in justice, I could not refuse. We were immured in ice, and should probably never escape. They feared that, if it was possible that I should dissipate, and a free passage be opened, I should be rash enough to continue my voyage, and lead them into fresh dangers after they might happily have surmounted this. They desired, therefore, that I should engage in a solemn promise that if the vessel should be freed, I would instantly direct my course southward. This speech troubled me. I had not despaired, nor had I yet conceived the idea of returning, if set free. Yet I could, in justice, or even in possibility, refuse this demand. I hesitated before I answered, when Frankenstein, who had first been silent and indeed appeared hardly to have force enough to attend, now roused himself. His eyes sparkled, and his cheeks flushed with momentary vigor. Turning towards the men, he said, "What do you mean? What do you demand of your captain? Are you so easily turned from your design? Did you not call this a glorious exposition? And wherefore was it glorious? Not because the way was smooth and placid as the southern sea, but because it is full of dangers and terror, because at every new incident your fortitude must be called forth, and your courage exhibited, because danger and death surrounded, and these dangers you are too brave to overcome. For this it was glorious. For this it was an honorable undertaking. You were hereafter to be hailed as the benefactors of your species, your names adored, to belong to brave men who encountered death for honor and the benefits of mankind. And now, behold, with the first imagination of danger, or, if you will, the first mighty and terrific trial of your courage, you shrink away, and are confident to be handed down as men who had not strength enough to endure cold and peril. And so, poor souls, they were chilly and returned to their warm firesides. Why, that requires not this preparation. You need not have come thus far and dragged your captain to the shame of a defeat, merely to prove yourselves cowards. Oh, be men, or be more than men. Be steady to your purposes and firm as a rock. This ice is not made of such stuff as your hearts might be. This is mutable, cannot withstand you. If you say that it shall not, do not return to your families with the stigma of disgrace marked on your brows. Return as heroes who have fought and conquered, and who know not what it is to turn their backs on the foe. He spoke with a voice so modulated that to the different feelings expressed by the speech, with eyes so full of lofty-eyed design and heroism, that who can wonder what these men moved? They looked to one another and were unable to reply. I spoke. I had told them to retire and consider what had been said, and I would not lead them further north if they strenuously desired the contrary, but that I hoped that with reflection their courage would return. They retired and turned towards my friend, but he was sunk in languor and almost deprived of life. How all this will terminate, I know not, but I had rather die than return shamefully, my purpose unfulfilled. Yet I fear such will be the fates. The man unsupported by ideas of glory and honor can never willingly continue to endure their present hardships. September 7th. The die is cast. I have consented to return if we are not destroyed. Thus my hopes blasted by cowardice and indecision. I come back ignorant, disappointed. It requires more philosophy than I possess to bear this injustice and patience. September 12th. It is past. I am returning to England. I have lost my hopes of utility and glory. I have lost my friend. But I will endeavor to detail these bitter circumstances to you, my dear sister, and while I have wafted towards England and towards you, I will not despond. On September 9th, the ice began to move. The roarings like thunder were heard at a distance, and the island split and cracked in every direction. We were in most imminent peril, as we could only retain passive. My chief attention was occupied by my unfortunate guest, whose illness increased in such a degree that he was entirely confined to his bed. The ice cracked between us and was driven with force towards the north. A breeze sprung from the west, and on the 11th, the passage toward the south became perfectly free. When the sailors saw this, and that their return to the native country was apparently assured, a shout of tumultuous joy broke from them, loud and long continued. Frankenstein, who was dozing, awoke and asked what the cause of the tumult. They shout, I said, because they will soon return to England. Do you then really return? Alas, yes. I cannot withstand their demands. I cannot lead them unwillingly to danger, and I must return. Do so, if you will, but I will not. You may give up your purpose, but mine is assigned to me by heaven, and I dare not. I am weak, but surely the spirits who have adjusted my vengeance will endow me with sufficient strength. Saying this, he endeavored to spring from his bed, but the exertion was too great for him. He fell back and fainted. It was long before he was restored, and I was often thought that life was entirely extinct. At length he opened his eyes, but he breathed with such difficulty and was unable to speak. The surgeon gave him a composing draught and ordered us to leave him undisturbed. In the meantime, he told me that my friend had not many hours to live. His sentence was pronounced, and I could only grieve and be patient. I sat by his bed watching him. His eyes were closed, and I thought that he slept. But presently he called me in his feeble voice, and, combining Then he come near me. Alas, the strength I relied on is gone. I feel that I shall soon die, and he, my enemy and my persecutor, may still be in being. Think not, Walton, that in the last moments of my existence I feel that the burning hatred and ardent desire for revenge I once expressed, but I feel myself justified in desiring the death of my adversary. During these last few days, I have been occupied in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature who was bound towards him to assure, as far as was in my power, the happiness of well-being. This was my duty, but there was another still paramount to that. My duty towards my fellow creatures had greater claims on my attention, because they included greater proportions of happiness or misery. Urged by this view, I refused, and I did refuse, right in refusing, to create a companion for the first creature. He showed unparalleled malignity and selfishness and evil. He destroyed my friends. He devoted to the destruction of beings who possess exquisite sensations, happiness, and wisdom. Nor do I know where this thirst for vengeance may end. Miserable himself that he may render no other wretched. He ought to die. The task of this destruction was mine, but I have failed. When actuated by selfish, vicious motives, I ask you to undertake my unfinished work, and I renew this request now, when I am only induced by reason and virtue. Yet I cannot ask you to renounce your country and friends to fulfill this task, and now that you are returning to England, you will have little chance of meeting with him. But this consideration of these points, the well balancing of what you may esteem your duties, I leave to you. My judgment and ideas are already disturbed by the near approach of death. I dare not ask you to do what I think right, for I may still be misled by passion. That he should live to be an instrument of mischief disturbs me. In other aspects, this hour, where I momentarily expect my release, is the only happy one I have enjoyed for several years. The forms of the beloved dead flit before me, and I hasten to their arms. Farewell, Walton. Seek happiness and tranquility, and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discovery. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes, yet another may succeed. His voice became fainter as he spoke, and at length, exhausted by his effort, he sunk into silence. About an hour and a half afterwards, he attempted again to speak, but was unable. He pressed my hand feebly, and his eyes closed forever, while the irradiation of a gentle smile passed away from his lips. Margaret, what comment can I make on the untimely extinction of this glorious spirit? What can I say that will enable you to understand the depth of my sorrow? All that I should express would be inadequate and feeble. My tears flow, my mind is overshadowed with a cloud of disappointments. But I journey towards England, and may there find consolation. I am interrupted. What do these sounds portend? It is midnight, the breeze blows fairly, and the watch on deck scarcely stir. Again, there is a sound as of a human voice, but coarser. It comes from the cabin where the remains of Frankenstein lie still. I must arise and examine. Good night, my sister. Great God, what a scene has taken place. I am yet dizzy from the remembrance of it. I hardly know whether I shall have the power to detail it, yet the tale which I have recorded would be incomplete without this final and wonderful catastrophe. I entered the cabin where lay the remains of my ill-fated admiral friend. Over him hung a form which I cannot find the words to describe, gigantic in stature, yet uncouth and distorted in its proportions. As he hung over the coffin, his face was concealed by long locks of ragged hair, but one vast hand was extended in color and apparently texture like that of a mummy. When he heard the sound of my approach, he ceased to utter exclamations of grief and horror, and sprung towards the window. Never did I behold a vision so horrible as his face, by such loathsome yet appalling hideousness. I shut my eyes involuntarily and endeavored to recollect what my duties were with regard to this destroyer. I called on him to stay. He paused, looking on me with wonder, and again turning towards the lifeless form of his creator. He seemed to forget my presence, and every feature and gesture seemed instigated by a wildest rage of some uncontrollable passion. That is also my victim, he exclaimed. In his murder, my crimes are consummated. This miserable series of my being is wound to a close. Oh, Frankenstein, generous and self-devoted being, what does it avail that I now ask thee to pardon me? I who irretrievably destroyed thee by destroying all thou lovest. Alas, he is cold. He may not answer me. His voice seemed suffocated, and my first impulses, which had suggested to me the duty of obeying the dying request of my friend and destroying his enemy, were now suspended by a mixture of curiosity and compassion. I approached this tremendous being. I dared not again raise my looks upon his face. There was something so scaring and unearthly in his ugliness. I attempted to speak, but the words died away on my lips. The monster continued to utter wild and incoherent self-reproaches. At length, I gathered resolution to address him, in a pause of his temper, of his passion. Your repentance, I said, is now superfluous. If you had listened to the voice of consciousness, and heeded the strings of remorse, before you had urged your diabolical vengeance to this extremity, Frankenstein would yet have lived. And do you dream, said the demon. Do you think that I was then dead to agony and remorse? He continued, pointing to the corpse. He suffered not more in the consummation of the deed. Oh, not just 10,000 portion of the anguish that was mine during the lingering detail of its execution. A frightful selfishness hurried on me, while my heart was poisoned with remorse. Think yet that there were grown so clearly music to my ears. My heart is fashioned to be susceptible to love and sympathy, and when wretched by misery to vice and hatred, it did not endure the violence of a change without tortures such as you cannot even imagine. After the murder of Clerval, I returned to Switzerland broken-hearted and overcome. I pitied Frankenstein. My pity amounted to horror. I abhorred myself. But when I discovered that he, the author at once of my existence and of unspeakable torments, dared to hope for happiness, that while he accumulated richness and despair upon me, he sought his own enjoyment and feelings and passions from the indulgence of which I was forever barred. The important envy and bitter indignation filled me with an insatiable thirst for vengeance. I recollected my threat and resolved that it should be accomplished. I knew that he was preparing for myself a deadly torture, but I was his slave, not the master of an impulse, which I detested, yet could not disobey. Yet when she died, nay, then I was not miserable. I had cast off all feelings, subdued all anguish to riot in the excess of my despair. Evil thenceforth became my good. Urged thus far, I had no choice but to adapt my nature to an element which I had willingly chosen. The completion of my demonical design came in insatiable passion, and now it is ended. There lay my last victim. I was at first touched by the expressions of his misery, yet when I called to mind what Frankenstein had said of his powers of eloquence and persuasion, and when I was cast my eyes on the lifeless form of my friend, indignation was rekindled within me. Wretch, I said, it is well that you come here to whine over the desolation that you have made. Throw a torch into a pile of buildings, and when they are consumed, you sit among the ruins and lament the fall. Hypocritical fiend! If he whom you mourn still lived, still would he be the object. Again he would become the prey of your accursed vengeance. Yet is it not pity that you feel? You only lament because the victim of your malignity is withdrawn from your power. Oh, it is not thus, interrupted the being. Yet such must be the impression conveyed to you by what appears to be the purport of my actions. Yet I seek not a fellow feeling in my misery. No sympathy may I find. When I first sought it was the love of virtue, the feelings of happiness and affection with which my whole being overflowed, that I wished to be participated in. But now that virtue has become to me a shadow, and that happiness and affection are turned into bitter and loathing despair. And what should I seek of sympathy? I am content to suffer alone, while my suffering shall endure. When I die, I am well satisfied with the abhorrence and opprobrium should load my memory. Once my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue, of fame, and of enjoyment. Once I falsely hoped to meet with beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I am capable of bringing forth. I was punished with high thoughts of honor and devotion. But now vice has degraded me beneath the meanest animal. No crime, no mischief, no malignity, no mercy can be found comparable to mine. When I call over the frightful catalogue of my deeds, I cannot believe I am he whose thoughts were once filled with sublime and transcendent visions of beauty and the majesty of goodness. But it is even so, the fallen angel becomes a malignant devil. Yet even that enemy of God and man hath friends and associates in this desolation. I am quite alone. You who call Frankenstein your friend seem to have a knowledge of my crimes and his misfortunes. But in the detail which he gave you of them, he could not sum up the hours and months of misery which I had endured, wasting my impotent passions. For whilst I destroyed his hopes, I did not satisfy my own desires. They were forever ardent and craving. Still I desired love and fellowship, and I was still spurned. Was there no injustice in this? Am I to be thought the only criminal when all humankind sinned against me? Why do you not hate Felix, who drove his friend from his door with contumely? Why do you not exonerate the rustic who sought to destroy the savior of his child? Nay, these are virtuous and immaculate beings, the miserable and the abandoned, and abortion, to be spurned at, and kicked, and trampled on. Even now my blood boils at the recollection of this injustice. But it is true that I am a wretch. I have murdered the lovely and the helpless. I have strangled the innocent as they slept, and grasped to death the throat of whoever injured me or any other living being. I have devoted my Creator, the select specimen of all that is worthy of love and admiration among men, to misery. I have punished him even to that irremediable ruin. There he lies, white and cold in death. You hate me, but your abhorrence cannot equal that which I regard myself. I look on the hands which I executed the deed. I think of the heart in which the imagination of it was conceived. I long for the moment when they will meet my eyes, when it will haunt my thoughts no more. Fear not that I shall be the instrument of future mischief. My work is nearly complete. Neither yours nor your men's death is needed to consummate the series of my being, and accomplish that which must be done, but it requires my own. Do not think that I shall be slow to perform the sacrifice. I shall put your vessel on an ice raft which brought me hither, and I shall seek the most northern extremity of the globe. I shall collect my funeral fire, and consume to ashes all this miserable frame, that it remains to afford no light to any curious or unhallowed wretch who will create such another as I have been. I shall no longer feel the agonies which now consume me, and be the prey of feelings unsatisfied, yet unquenched. He is dead who called me into being, and when I shall be no more, the very remembrance of us both will speedily vanish. I shall no longer see the sun or stars, or feel the winds play on my cheeks. The light, feeling, and sense will all pass away, and in this condition must I find my happiness. Some years ago, when the first images which this world affords first opened upon me, when I felt the cheering warmth of the sun, when I heard the rustling of the leaves and the chirping of birds, and all these were mine, I should have wept to die. Now that is only consolation. Polluted by crimes, torn from the bitterest remorse, where can I find rest but in death? Farewell, I leave you, and you and the last of the humankind eyes will ever behold. Farewell, Frankenstein. If thou wert yet alive, and yet cherished the decline of revenge of me, it would be a better satiated in my life than in my destruction. But it was not so. Thou didst seek my extinction, that I might not cause greater wretchedness, and if yet, in some mode unknown to me, thou hast not yet ceased to think and feel, thou desirest not my life, my own misery. Blasted thou wert, my agony was still superior to thine, for the bitter sting of remorse may not cease to rankle in my wounds, until death shall close them forever. But soon, he cried with sad and solemn enthusiasm, I shall die, and what I feel now will no longer be felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pyre triumphantly, and result in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of my conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. My spirit will sleep in peace, or if it thinks, it shall surely not think thus. Farewell. He sprang from the cabin window as he said this, upon the ice raft which lay loose close to my vessel. He was soon borne away by the waves, lost in the darkness and distance.